Cuyahoga County is one of the top 10 counties in the entire United States in confirmed wrongful convictions. Since 1989, nearly 40% of exonerations in Ohio have come from Cuyahoga County. To make matters worse, our current prosecutor shows no interest in recognizing and addressing additional wrongful convictions that have happened. He consistently retries people whose convictions are overturned, and he has failed to treat other wrongful conviction claims with the gravity that they deserve. When a person is exonerated, it means that their conviction has been overturned. A wrongful conviction does not have to be the result of deliberate misconduct, but in many cases, the prosecutor on the case may have done something that did not ensure a fair proceeding, whether intentionally or not. One common basis for a wrongful conviction in Cuyahoga County is that the original prosecutors did not provide defense counsel with evidence that might prove a person's innocence. Under a Supreme Court case called Brady v. Maryland, prosecutors are constitutionally required to turn over any evidence they possess that might be helpful to a defendant. Thus, when a prosecutor fails to do so, it is called a Brady violation. The U.S. Constitution requires that any conviction that might have resulted from a Brady violation must be thrown out, with the opportunity for a new trial. In recent years, several Cuyahoga County residents have had their cases overturned for this very reason. They found evidence of their innocence and brought it to the courts decades after their original convictions. It is important to note that while Brady violations result in an overturned conviction, they do not require any discipline for a prosecutor. The legal doctrine of prosecutorial immunity prohibits people from suing prosecutors personally for any misconduct they committed in the course of their job, including Brady violations, even if that misconduct was intentional. Unlike, for example, the medical profession, where procedures are in place to regulate and deter serious mistakes, a prosecutor's office does not necessarily have these protections in place for misconduct. Instead, it is on the office's leadership to prioritize not only addressing, but preventing these kinds of violations. It is bad enough that sometimes an innocent person is convicted. This is a miscarriage of justice, as the real perpetrator has not been held accountable, and victims have not been given true closure. It is also traumatic for the wrongfully convicted and their loved ones. But instead of addressing this injustice and working to remedy it, the prosecutor's office is doing the opposite. In many cases where convictions are overturned, the prosecutor's office, under the incumbent's tenure, has chosen to take people back to trial on their original, decades-old charges. This practice wastes resources and often prolongs the release of innocent individuals. A few recent examples are worth discussing. Isaiah Andrews was originally convicted of the murder of his wife Regina in 1975, despite no physical evidence that pointed to him as the murderer. In 2019, his conviction was overturned due to a Brady violation. In this case, records that showed police had investigated and arrested someone else who had since died. Mr. Andrews was freed after 45 years in prison. But under the current elected prosecutor, the prosecutor's office insisted on taking Mr. Andrews back to trial on those original charges. And in 2021, a jury found him not guilty after deliberating for only 15 minutes. Mr. Andrews died in 2022 before he was able to receive compensation that he was entitled to from the state of Ohio for his wrongful incarceration. Michael Buhner was convicted of murder in 2002. Mr. Buhner maintained his innocence, and in 2014, a friend was able to obtain records from the Cleveland Police Department that included witness statements that a man of a different race than Mr. Buhner had committed the crime. These statements were never disclosed to Mr. Buhner's trial attorney, another Brady violation. After another 7 years, Buhner's conviction was overturned. the prosecutor's office chose to take Mr. Buhner back to trial in 2023, delaying his ability to move on with his life for 2 years. At trial, the prosecutor's office presented no physical evidence and relied on testimony that was directly contradicted by the new witnesses. The jury found Mr. Buhner not guilty in less than 2 hours. Michael Sutton and Kenny Phillips were bystanders to a shooting in 2006, and were charged and convicted of attempted murder in 2007 and sentenced to a combined 138 years in prison. In 2015, attorneys found a Brady violation. In this case, previously undisclosed evidence of 2 police officer accounts of the incident that directly contradicted the testimony of police officers at Mr. Sutton and Mr. Phillips' trial. Mr. Sutton and Mr. Phillips had their convictions overturned in 2021, but the prosecutor's office took them back to trial on their original charges in 2022, where the jury found both Mr. Sutton and Mr. Phillips not guilty. Mr. Sutton and Mr. Phillips have filed a federal lawsuit against the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office for its past practices. Cuyahoga County, like many large prosecutors' offices, has a unit tasked with addressing wrongful convictions. It's called the Conviction Integrity Unit. The unit was structured to allow for input from community members, including retired judges and respected local attorneys. However, since 2018, the incumbent's first full year in office, this unit saw so few referrals that the entire external community board resigned in November of 2022. In the resignation letter, members of the board noted that they had not met in 2 years. Fewer than 10 applications were submitted for review by this board from 2018 to 2022, and during meetings it was clear that the elected prosecutor already had outcomes in mind for the cases they were reviewing. His interest was in keeping defense attorneys from learning what investigations had uncovered, instead of reaching a fair outcome. It has now been almost 15 months since those external members resigned, and nobody has been appointed to replace them. When someone is exonerated, those involved in the original wrongful conviction do not face consequences for their failure to uphold the law. Instead, taxpayers bear the burden and are the ones who pay settlements for the wrongfully convicted. Ohioans have paid over $60 million since 1977 in wrongful conviction settlements. Meanwhile, a person who is wrongfully accused of a crime will face the consequences of this grave mistake for the rest of their lives. Post-traumatic stress and depression are common in these individuals, both while incarcerated and after they are released. Some have missed major milestones with their family, the birth of a child, a death of a parent, who they may also have missed time with. All have missed time with loved ones that can never be replaced. Communities are further destabilized as well by the unnecessary absence of an innocent individual. This burden, as with many in the criminal justice system, falls disproportionately on Black individuals and communities. More than half of all confirmed wrongfully convicted individuals in the United States are Black, despite Black adults making up less than 14% of the population. More broadly, a system that does not recognize its own imperfections is a system that people are not inclined to trust. Faith in the criminal justice system comes from transparency, accessibility, and an acknowledgement of flaws, not from denying that those flaws exist. We can only build faith in the criminal justice system by acknowledging wrongful convictions, the harm they do, and the ways in which we must both prevent them on the front end and rectify them on the back end. This is the opposite of how the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office is working right now. The approach this office operates under is one where wrongful conviction claims are opposed even when they have merit. This approach has no basis in public safety and is destabilizing our community. We can do so much better for the people who our system has wronged. Justice, more than anything else, is about getting things right. When the system doesn't get it right the first time, that is no excuse to double down. Everybody working within the system must do everything they can to fix it. I'm Matthew Ahn, and I approve this message.